Good morning. Welcome to another edition of From Beyond Champaign. I'm Cody. You can follow me on all the socials at Cody_CHGO. It is the morning after. I couldn't do it last night. I was so incredibly mad, angry. Even a form of just acceptance was setting in a little bit. Maybe that's a little overreactionary. We can talk all about it, but nonetheless, I just couldn't come on here and do a post game last night. Illinois loses 91-70 at home to Maryland. Brad Underwood now 3-8 against Maryland in his career, and it is their first 20-plus point home loss since 2018 to Penn State, another team that has some form of kryptonite on Brad Underwood. Brad Underwood has struggled against Maryland and Penn State the most throughout his career at Illinois. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what it is. It's those two teams and 11 a.m. tips. I don't know what it is. It was an absolute brutal loss. It was an embarrassing loss. It was unacceptable. I don't care that Tomislav Isivic was out with the flu, whatever. Half the team's sick, according to Brad Underwood in postgame. And I think in many ways during his postgame press conference, he tries, in many ways, he contradicts himself because I am with him in terms of the fact that, it's hard to win against this Maryland team that's very, big down low without Isivic, but at the same time, 62 points in the paint. They lost 62 points in the paint. I don't think he was trying to make excuses, but he ended up making excuses. It's been a bad week for Brad in terms of stuff said to media, I guess you could say. The whole things related to the refs at Michigan State. He was asked about it the day before, and he let everyone know that he called the conference or whatever to complain about it. And it's it kind of comes off as that's what he's focused on instead of, the next game, at least at that point, 4 days after. So you have that going into a game where, he's historically not been so good against Maryland. So there was it is what it is. Do I think that this team just was unprepared for this one? I guess you could make that argument. They lost by 21 points, right? But this was the first time in 56, 57 games where Illinois lost consecutive games. They had a 50-plus game streak avoiding consecutive losses. All this does for me is just kind of give me a sense of reality of what this team is. It was fun beating Oregon by 90. It was fun beating Penn State by 90 without Kasparis-Jakasjonas. But these last three games, except for maybe the Indiana game, so two of the last three games, all it's done is kind of remind me that entering the season, you can make the argument. Illinois is the most talented team in the Big Ten. They have more talent than anyone else, probably. You can at least make the argument. But they're young, inexperienced. They lacked continuity coming into the year. And I said this in my TikTok video I put up last night. I quoted Theo Epstein saying, development isn't always linear. And you can't have 12 turnovers from your backcourt, and that includes plenty from Kasparis-Jakasjonas, who I thought, you look at the box score, he 21, 7, and 7, he nearly put up a triple-double. Despite that, he still had 7 turnovers, and he's been a turnover machine. And I think a lot of that just comes with the fact that he's young. I will say in this game, his usage was as high as we've seen it without Tomislav Isivic out there. So should I give him a little bit of break because he was just forced to do so much? Perhaps. But this is where we're at. We are in mid to late January, and we're running out of excuses. I'm running out of excuses. And so because I'm running out of excuses, I'm telling myself maybe reality is this Illinois team is still basically just a middle of the pack team in the Big Ten right now. I came into the season saying they can finish top 5 in the Big Ten. They can still do that. But I feel like our chances to win the Big Ten are pretty much dead. I guess for tonight, for Michigan and Purdue, I guess I'll cheer for Michigan because I feel like they're more likely to fall apart down the stretch than Purdue. It's disappointing because you put yourself in you have so much talent. You put yourself in a nice position with playing at such a tough non-conference schedule. But the loss to Northwestern continues to only hurt more. The loss to USC just, I thought USC they went on a couple game stretch here where they've looked pretty good. So maybe they're better than what we all think. But shit, man, like you can't lose at home to USC with or without Kasparis. Not that USC team, and not this Illinois team with this kind of talent. If I'm going to sit here and say they're the most talented team in the conference, you can't lose at home to USC. And now you lose at home to Maryland. It's just, the loss to Michigan State hurts still for sure. Michigan State's leading the conference, though. I can circle February 15th and know that we get another shot. Get another shot against them on Terrence Shannon night. Okay. But in terms of winning the Big Ten, it's just like, this loss just adds to the pain that I have from the USC and the Northwestern losses. You should be top 3 in this conference right now. I circled a loss. If you go back to beginning of January, you listen to the show, beginning of January, I did a show where I was like talking about who I'm buying stock on going into January. Funny enough, I said I was selling my Ben Humrickhouse stock, and he's been awesome for the most part outside of yesterday. And I was selling my Ben Humrickhouse stock, and I was buying my Trey White stock. And Trey White's he's been fine, but he hasn't been more than what I've seen at the end in December. And Ben Humrickhouse has outperformed what I expected. So that is what it is. That's a separate story. But I said in that episode that I was optimistic about a 7-2 January, which isn't going to happen now because now you have 3 losses in January. So they can still go 6-3. They can still go 6-3. But I said that they were going to lose to Indiana, and I said they were going to lose to Maryland because they were the ones that just they wouldn't have made sense to me. And that's what Illinois does. They lose games that don't make sense. Now, I will say that they lost to Maryland in January of last season. That Maryland team wasn't as good as this one. Queen and Julian Reese, they owned Illinois last night. Again, 62 points in the paint. They had like 52 points themselves combined. They owned the paint, and is that because Isivic wasn't out there? Yeah, I do think that they owned the paint like they did. They scored 62 points in the paint because they didn't have Isivic. But being without Tommy cannot be the reason you lose by 21 at home. It cannot be the reason that you allow 62 points in the paint. I feel like it can be noted. 2 things can be true. When they don't have Isivic, they have to play small, and other teams can take advantage of that. Another thing can be true. You can't lose by 21 at home to Maryland in a must-win game if you want to win the Big Ten, if you want to be considered an elite team. It's been fun listening to some of the national outlets throw Illinois into the Final Four conversation, into the Elite Eight conversation. I promise you, for me, it has been fun to watch and listen to these national talking heads include Illinois into that type of conversation. But right now, they're just not living up to that standard. Brad Underwood said in postgame that, they need to get whole. They need to get healthy. He says that because the team has had the flu or has been sick, they haven't been able to practice the way they want to practice. I get it, man. I get it. But this is D1. This is the Big Ten. Like, I just cannot allow that to be an excuse. I just can't allow that to be an excuse. At this point, I think Illinois is a really good team that has a ceiling as high as anyone in college basketball that can absolutely get hot at the end of March, or at the end of February, going into March. Absolutely. But the floor is so low with this team. On any given day, any team can beat them. And until they start winning more consistently again, that's just what I'm going to think. The season is still young. I think they're done on trying to win the Big Ten, considering how good Michigan State and Michigan have been in my opinion, a surprising way. And Purdue is still there. Wisconsin, right? They're right there. I think Illinois can finish in that top 5, but I think the Big Ten, we can just throw it out the window at this point. And it's largely because of those losses to Northwestern and USC, those bad losses. Now, objectively, is this game a bad loss? Yes, you lose by 21 at home to Maryland. However, I think this is more of of course, it's an embarrassing loss, but it's more of in terms of ranking it, or how the committee is going to look at this when it comes to tournament resume at the end of the year. I think it's just more of a tough loss because I think Maryland's good. I've thought Maryland is good all season. They haven't been good on the road, which makes this even more frustrating. This was their first road win of the year, but they're a team that you can't sleep on. I don't rank them with Northwestern or USC. So it's just a really frustrating loss overall, but I don't think this is a loss that we'll be looking at down the road and saying, this is why they receded this, or this is why they receded that. I believe Maryland is 24th in the net. Illinois is 8th in the net. So it's just a really frustrating, tough loss. Embarrassing loss to lose by 21 at home on your home court. 21 at home. Why did I say home court? So that's my overall reaction to this game, is that two things are true. It was going to be tough to beat Maryland without Tommy, considering the size that Maryland has. On the other end of the spectrum, you can't allow 62 points in the paint. And you can't lose by 21 at home. Now, the reasons that I really fully believe that they lost this game: 16 turnovers, my friends. 16. My Taco Bell order was $16 last night. I made sure it would be $16, okay? There was crucial points in this game where Illinois would go on a 5 or 6-0 run, cut it to 5, cut it to 4, cut it to 6 at times, and then they would have a crucial turnover in transition most of the time too, and it would be so deflating because Maryland would come back and score a layup or just hit a shot. And I don't know how many more times I'm going to have to stress it, dude. Like, they just turn the ball over so much, dude. They do. Not on a consistent basis, but in their losses, you just look at the turnovers and you're like, That's why they lost. Now, they lost at Michigan State. I think they only had 10, right? So they've had losses where it's not because of turnovers exclusively, but I feel like they've had way too many losses over the years where you just look at the turnover column and you're just like, well, this is where they lost the game. I feel like turnovers are the reason they lost the game last night. That and the lack of size, obviously. The lack of size was definitely crucial. But I think they lost by 21 because of the turnovers. I think Maryland only had 7. I don't know. So that's my overall reaction. Turnovers lost this game. It was a tough loss. It's an embarrassing loss. How this team will respond will be interesting. I was hopeful for a bigger response yesterday coming off the Michigan State loss. I think for the first time in a very long time, I'm going to put more of my blame here on Brad for not, I guess, in a way, having this team prepared. Because while he doesn't want to make excuses, he made excuses in the postgame. Like he inadvertently made excuses in postgame, talking about how much Tomislav means in this, and we need to get whole, and it just, this is the first time in a while where I'm like, Brad, it's put up or shut up. Like, this is where the expectation is, man. This is the standard that you have set. You have set the standard yourself, Brad, that you want to win championships, that you want to be at the top of the Big Ten year in and year out. And it's just voicing over and over about how much Tomislav Isivic means to your offense it's just not good enough for me to accept. It just isn't, especially with all of the complaining related to the refs earlier in the week. So now I'll say this in defense related to complaining about the refs earlier in the week. He probably wouldn't have said anything if he just wasn't asked about it. So it is what it is. But I think last night's postgame was probably one of the more frustrating postgames I've had to listen to Brad talk. And as everyone knows, if you've watched this show or listened to this show over the last 2 years, 1.5 years, whatever, that you all know that I love Brad and I will defend him like it's Game of Thrones and it's me against the world. You know what I mean? Like I have defended him plenty. This is probably the first time where I feel like I'm very kind of disappointed in what he's got to say in postgame. So, like I said, I get it from a certain standpoint, but it can't be the reason that you lost. You got to have your team more prepared, especially coming off a loss. If you are serious about winning Big Ten championships, if you're serious about being an elite team, you can't give me the post game you gave me yesterday. So I'll say this: the one thing that he did say that I was like, yeah, you're right, was when he said they got an ass kicking. So it was a very weird post game in the fact that he said that, we got our ass kicked. Maryland deserves all the credit. But then through questions is basically making excuses about how they didn't have Tommy, and that's why they lost the game. That's just how it came off. Whether he intended it to be that or not, I don't know. He said he wasn't trying to make excuses, but he was basically making excuses. That's how I took it. We got a few comments here. Jay, welcome back. He says, my expectations for this team are sinking like the Titanic. Yeah, it depends on how high your expectations were. I've like I said a few minutes ago, my expectations coming into the season were very up in the air. I thought that their ceiling was high. I thought that they could finish top 5 in the Big Ten. Did I have expectations of winning the Big Ten? Did I have expectations of going to the Final Four? No, I did not. Not realistically. It was always like, being a fan, dreaming a little bit, right? And I'm allowed to do that. You guys are allowed to do that. So if your expectations are adjusting a little bit, I don't necessarily blame you after the last 2 weeks that we've watched this team play. Jay also says, turnovers, terrible 3-point shooting. This team is what it is, wildly inconsistent. Yeah, so I was reading Illini Inquirer this morning before I jumped on here. Illinois has fallen to 17th in 3-point percentage in Big Ten play. And this is a team that's going to shoot a lot of 3-pointers. They shot 21% from 3 last night. 6 for 28. Trey White hit one. Kylan Boswell hit one. Jake Davis hit one. Kerry Booth hit one. And Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn hit 2. If there's one positive from this game, probably Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. 15 points on 5 of 8 shooting. He had 4 rebounds. I felt like he probably was their best player last night. Not one turnover for him either. Just played his role and was a spark plug off the bench. But yeah, the 3-point shooting for this team overall in Big Ten play has been bad. That's why a week ago I said that their most complete game I felt like they played was against Indiana. They shot 30% from 3 in that one and only shot 40% from the field in that game, but won by 1,000 because I felt like their defense was a large part. They didn't turn the ball over. I just felt like that was the most complete game they had played overall, like a realistic one, right? Because the Oregon game was just like everything clicked on all cylinders, right? The Penn State game without KJ, that was probably the ceiling that we would see from this team without KJ, right? And then the USC game happened, and we saw what this team's floor was without KJ. And then Michigan State, I felt like they played a really good game overall in terms of competing on the road and all of that, but not having your best player for 9 minutes certainly isn't going to help your chances to win. But the point that I'm getting here with this is that overall they haven't been shooting the 3 well, and it hurts. It's been hurting them because they're shooting a lot of 3s. And I'm not sitting here saying they need to change up the game plan. Brad Underwood built this roster around shooting 3s. He's done this every year since Kofi Coburn graduated. Like, this is the type of team they want to be. They want to play fast. They want to get out in transition, and they want to shoot a lot of 3s. I don't want them to change. On offense, at least, I don't necessarily want them to change. They just need to start hitting shots. They have guys who can shoot the 3. We've seen it. That they got to shoot better than 21%. I asked a few episodes ago, can this team find a way to shoot 30 to 35% from 3? I think that's a fair expectation for what they're trying to do, for what this team is built around. That's a fair expectation, I think, to be able to shoot somewhere between 30 and 35% as a team. Because I think this team is good enough defensively when at full strength that's fine. They shot 30% from 3 against Indiana, and they blew them out because they were great defensively. It's just a really disappointing loss in terms of just everything. Maryland got out to a fast start, led 8-2 at one point early on, and you just knew that it was going to be a dogfight, and you knew the size down low was going to be a problem for Illinois all night. And there was just no, Brad finally went to a zone later in the game, and he said in postgame that they hadn't practiced the zone, so it's like it worked for a few possessions, but Maryland figured it out pretty quickly. Just to really, you throw your hands up and you're like, I'm not really sure what else they could have done, or he could have done in-game for in-game adjustments at least. Maybe he could have gone to the zone earlier. I can understand why he didn't want to go to it earlier, considering they hadn't really practiced it. But when you're getting destroyed inside the way they were, maybe he should have tried it earlier. But Again, I think the turnovers are a big part. The amount of transition layups they had, the amount of layups they had in general from their guard play too. Gillespie had a great game, right? I don't know. I don't know, my friends. I don't really know what to think. Jay says, I think they're second to last in 3-point percentage in Big Ten play. Yes, they're 17th now. That's just second to last. Jay also says, problem is last night, if you shoot a lot of threes, will you be better offensive rebounding? Didn't happen at all last night. That's a good point. That's a good point too. Like, and Brad said that too. And this wasn't part of his excuse. It wasn't part of his unintentional excuse making. Illinois had 36 rebounds overall, and Maryland had 40. I think that's another thing that we've come to realize. If they don't own the boards, if they do not destroy teams on the rebounding stat, they will either lose in a close battle or they'll have a game like this. And they got destroyed on the boards last night. They didn't get any offensive rebounds. Maryland had 11 of their own. Illinois had 2 at half, finished with 8. So they rebounded. They got on the offensive boards better in the second half. But when you're top 10 in the country in rebounding, I expect more from this. And Jay says it perfectly. Whenever you shoot a lot of threes, you get those long rebounds. You get a better chance to get an offensive rebound. And, I think Maryland deserves a lot of credit for the way they rebounded, and that being a big part of why they won. I would rank rebounding second on why they lost this game. I would go the reasons they lost this game: turnovers, rebounding, shooting 21% from 3. Those are the 3 reasons I think they lost the game. And then I think I would put Tomislav Isivic, number 4, on why they lost the game. Can't blame the refs tonight. However, I do think Merez's second foul, I think, it was first or second foul in the first half. I tweeted it. I think Ant Wright tweeted the GIF, and I used it to prove a point as well of a foul that was called on Merez. That was probably the worst call I saw all night. I didn't find myself sitting here blaming or looking at the officiating and blaming them for some calls. Sure, there were some moments where I think you can make a few arguments, but it wasn't as atrocious as it was at Michigan State. Let me take a break. Sorry. So I don't know, guys. I don't know. That's those are my 3 takeaways. They got to shoot the 3 better. They got to limit turnovers. With their average, I think, is around 10 or 11 for the season. You can't have 16 in a game no matter what. You got to shoot the 3 better. You got to rebound better. You got to limit your turnovers. And then I can get on board with getting healthy. Because, when the team is healthy, they're going to do whatever they want to do. And guys will be in the roles that they're used to. The good news about being healthy is that Tomislav is just sick. Will he be fine on Sunday? I hope so. I sure as hell hope so, man. I hope the entire team is. Jay says 30% is the magic number from 3. If it's under that, it will probably be a dogfight no matter who you play from now on. Yeah. JA says, Brad also complained how the team, especially KJ, is not getting foul calls to get him to the free throw line in Big Ten play. Yes. Now, that was part of what I was thinking was kind of the excuse making. Now, he has a good point. Against the 4 SEC teams that they played, he shot a lot of free throws. Like KJ shot more free throws. And I think in Big Ten play, he hasn't got nearly as many. That said, tonight, Kasparis had 12 free throw attempts. So maybe he's talking about as a whole, but he doesn't have an excuse for Kasparis not getting foul calls tonight. That's for sure. Illini in Iowa says they all played like they were sick. Yeah. Again, like I get it, man. I get it. Maybe you're under the weather, you're not going to play your best. You're at home and you have historically not played well against Maryland. You can't lose 2 in a row if you're trying to win the Big Ten. It's just a lame excuse for the standard that Brad has set, man. It's just a lame excuse for the standard that Brad has set. And Illini and Iowa, I'm not saying that you're making that excuse. I'm just saying that if Brad is using that as an excuse, then it's a lame excuse. And it just felt like in certain points of that press conference last night, it felt like he was making an excuse. But, we can turn the corner here. We're at the 30-minute mark. We can turn the corner here. You got Northwestern on Sunday, I believe. You got Northwestern on Sunday, 2:00 game, which is a better time, I think, than 11 a.m. on Sunday, or, it's still a little bit of an early tip-off, but it's not 11 a.m., right? You got Northwestern, you got Nebraska to close out January, all right? I was optimistic about a 7-2 month. It's not going to happen. That was Maryland's loss, is your third loss here in January. Easily could have gone different ways if you, things go differently at Michigan State. Maybe if you don't, if you take USC a little bit more seriously, I guess. But it is what it is. So can this team finish 6-3 to close out January? I'm telling you, if Illinois loses their third straight game against Northwestern, we're going to have massive problems here, man. We're going to have massive problems here. You were better than Northwestern in Evanston. You were better than them. And then you just fell apart in the final 2 minutes. I'm looking for revenge on Sunday. I'm looking for revenge. You should have won it in Evanston, and you better win on Sunday. You are better than this Northwestern team. All right. And then they got Nebraska on the road. Nebraska, tough team to play there at their house. They did just lose to USC the other day at home, though. I'm just talking about how you should beat USC. Nebraska losing to USC at home. Maybe by end of year, we'll look at the USC losses like they were better than what we all thought. I still think you got to beat USC at home, though. But to bring it around here, that they've played pretty well on the road this year. They had every chance to win at Michigan State. They should have won at Northwestern. They beat Oregon by 90. They pulled it out against Washington, right? I think they can win these next two. We'll go into February with some good vibes. That's my prediction at this point. You're going to win these next two. Take care of business against teams that you should take care of business. Get healthy and turn the corner. Every team goes through adversity. I'm hoping, you want my optimistic outlook? I'm hoping that this adversity only makes this team better when we all really truly care in March. I'm someone who wants to win the Big Ten every year. I don't know how much y'all listening care. Like maybe I think a lot of fans mostly care about March success. And I think those fans are the ones who are Brad's biggest detractors. But listen, man, winning your conference as many times as you can, or be in a position to me is important. And who knows? Maybe the Big Ten isn't out of the question, but they're going to need Michigan State to lose some games, and they're going to need. I think we should all be rooting for Michigan tonight. I don't think they're going to go to Mackey Arena and win, but I guess that's who I'm going to root for tonight. Yeah. So, a few minutes left. I said in my TikTok video that Will Riley was an absolute no-show. Was it because he's sick too? I don't know, man. I don't know how to describe the Will Riley experience anymore, other than I think Carter Elliott said it best on the Sleepers podcast earlier this week, that Will Riley is one of those guys. Like he's got to hit his first 2 shots guy. Like if he hits his first 2 shots, he can carry you a little bit on offense. If he misses his first 2 shots, he's going to give you nothing. I'm in a couple Discord channels. I saw someone ask, like, should Will Riley have reclassified? Like, was he ready? This and that. Like, what he did at Michigan State was pretty impressive on the road, freshman. Like, you can tell that he has the talent. He's just so raw, man. He's just so raw. But I say the first 2 shots, he played 17 minutes, 0 for 2 from the field. He gave them nothing. He gave them nothing. And on a night when you didn't have Isivic, you need Will Riley to be something, man. And I feel bad in a way to criticize him, but he's one of the highest rated recruits you've ever got. And I feel bad because the kid's 17, 18 years old. And again, I understand that he is raw, but for this team to get to where we think they can get, for this team to get to where we think they can get in our delusional, optimistic brains, he's got to be better than that. He simply just has to be better than that. I'm not asking for 20 points a night. I'm asking for just 17 minutes of more than just cardio, brother. So he had 3 assists, so he didn't have the Tony Snell game. But they need him to score, dude. They need him to score. That all said, he took 2 shots. Did he necessarily get? Did he get the volume? Did he even get an opportunity to shoot the ball the way that Maryland was guarding? I guess not. Benham Rickhouse only took 3 shots last night. And I felt like the only reason he only took 3 shots is because he just couldn't get any shots open. Merez, 19 minutes, 5 points, only 2 rebounds, right? I think those 2 guys in your starting lineup are the reason you lost this game. Or one of the reasons that they lost this game. And again, to go with your turnovers. But I think they need more from Will Riley on some form of consistent basis, So yeah, I think if you want an optimistic note before I leave, I like the minutes that Kerry Booth gave you. He didn't hit the 3-pointers that he took, but I like his presence. I felt like he kind of gave them a little bit of a boost, especially at the end of the first half. So I don't really know how to feel about Kerry Booth, but I do think that he's earned a little bit of time here. I know he mainly played last night because Isivic was out, but I think as long as he stays ready, he can go out there and help them. But I think his value for sure is like his 3-point shooting, and they need him. I do think that at some point this guy can make an impact with this team, but I felt like his energy that he provided them last night, at least at the end of the first half, was good. So I guess I learned a little bit more about Kerry Booth yesterday. That's one optimistic thing. I mentioned Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who's been awesome in Big Ten play. I think yeah, that's all I really have. I mean, you look at the stat sheet for KJ and you look at Kylan, and it's like, okay, I like that Kylan went to the basket more. He only took 3 threes, and I didn't feel like he took any of those like deep off the dribble threes. He took a lot of shots at the basket. He dribble drives, set plays that they ran. I thought that he did that well. He was active on the boards. but he had 5 turnovers, right? 12 turnovers between him and KJ. So it's hard to say anything real positive about the backcourt. So Dre Gibbs Lawhorn and Kerry Booth are my 2 positives from this game. It's got to be more than that on Sunday against Northwestern. Okay. All right. Thanks for the few of you who tuned into this Illinois therapy session. I will feel better probably by the end of the day, and I will move on to Sunday at some point. This is a tough one. Embarrassing loss to Maryland, 91-70. Let me know your thoughts in the chat. If you didn't watch this live, let me know your thoughts in the chat, and I'll try to answer some of them. I always say this, and then I don't, because my life is just so busy with my full-time job and life and everything. So just know that I'm reading your stuff. I just don't necessarily get to it when I want to. So we'll just keep chugging along, and all I'm saying is they better win Sunday. I'm going to start getting real irrational if they don't win on Sunday against the team they should beat. Okay? So, again, hit that like button before you go. I would appreciate it. Subscribe. I'm also on Apple Podcasts now and on Spotify. Those links are in the description. So if you'd rather listen to the audio version, go subscribe. Would mean a lot. Leave a review. All those 2 things. 5 stars, please. Thank you. And yeah, I'll see y'all on Sunday, probably after the game. So until then, Illinois loses 91-70. Hope y'all had a good therapy session. Get yourself some Taco Bell breakfast. Pretty good. I'll see you all on Sunday. Have a good rest of your day and the start of your weekend. And as always, ILL.